Okay, in this next lesson, I'm going to show you how to make an uplifter using Massive. So this is what we call a pitch uplifter. So what happens is basically the pitch of a note will rise over, an 8-bar period, creating like the, the impression that the piece is uplifting and it's building into a drop. Okay, now this requires some pretty complex use of Massive, especially if you haven't been using it very long. But you don't need to know what all the different buttons and knobs do just yet. You just have to kind of follow along with me and make sure you can replicate and create the same sound. So I'm going to create it, and I want you to I'm going to explain it as I go, and I want you to follow along and create it for yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do is insert a new MIDI track, okay? And I'm going to put an instance of Massive on that track. So just drag Massive onto the track. And our first build up is going to be over this 8-bar period here. And it's going to build up over this section. The pitch is going to rise. So we're going to create a new MIDI clip by pressing Control-Shift-M or Command-Shift-M if you are on a Mac. And I want you to add the tonic note, so the tonic note of the key of the piece you're working in. So I'm in C minor, so I'm going to put a C. And I want to you to put it down on the 1 octave, so the C1 octave. So now if I play this, it should just make a low-pitched C note that go over the 8 bars. Let's have a listen. Okay, so nothing fancy so far. I'm going to open Massive, so if on the bottom right-hand corner you can see the other side of your track, which is the mixing side of your track, or if you double-click on the track above, you can actually get to that section as well. Click the spanner to open up Massive again. And what we're going to do is we are going to turn these oscillators, the amplitude up on all of them. Now, this first oscillator, I'm going to leave the pitch at 0. The second oscillator, I'm going to move the pitch to -12, and I'm also going to move the pitch to -12. So what it now has is 3 different notes playing at once, but these 2 are an octave below. So let's have a listen to how it sounds now. So you can kind of hear a buzzy note below the track, below the note. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to detune these notes a little bit. So if you move to the right of the decimal place, it kind of moves the pitch in what we call cents. Just to explain, the left-hand side is actually semitones. So 12 semitones in an octave. So all I've done is put these notes down an octave below. So 12 semitones, if you got 12 notes of a keyboard, white and black keys, that makes an octave. Okay, so all I've done there is kind of phase these a little bit so they're not completely perfectly in tune. I might go actually, the other way to make, so they're close to the pitch. They're close to being exactly 12, but not quite. And it makes this kind of phasing sound. Listen to it now. So it kind of makes the synth sound wider. All right, so down in the right-hand corner here, we have these things called macros. And what a macro allows you to do is basically assign them to a whole bunch of these blank slots in Massive. And it allows you to control multiple parameters at once. So for example, I'm going to bring this, okay, drag it onto the box below the pitch under oscillator 1. And I'm going to grab the right side of the decimal place and drag this up to 48. Okay, so we learnt before that 12 semitones is an octave. Okay, so 48 semitones is 4 octaves. So what's going to happen now when I move this up, I'll play the note and it will move the pitch of that oscillator up 4 octaves. We'll do this right now to demonstrate. Okay, but what's happening is these are remaining at the same pitch. So if I move these on to these slots as well and change these to 48 semitones, same here, 48. Okay, now when I play all of these notes, they will move up. All of these notes will move up to all these oscillators that are playing the notes, will move up 4 octaves. Okay, so from here, what we can do is add some few effects to make this sound a little bit cooler. If we come to the voicing tab down here, we have this unisono box here. Now what this basically means is, okay, we've got 3 oscillators, so 3 different sounds being created. But we can kind of multiply those sounds. So if I put like 7 here, for example, I've got 7 copies of this, 7 copies of this, 7 copies of this. Effectively just making the track sound thicker. Let's just have a listen quickly. Okay. And here, if I use this pitch cutoff, this allows me to detune all of those different 7 copies of each note, slightly like we did here. We've detuned these notes here. I can do that again between all of those and detune them more. So that creates a more kind of a wider phasing effect. Let's have a listen. Okay. From here, I'm going to come over to this effects knob over here, and I'm going to add what we call a dimension expander, and I'm just going to crank that to halfway. And all this does is kind of thicken up the sound. Likewise here, I'm going to add a reverb, which is the normal reverb, and I'm going to crank that to halfway as well, and boost the density and the color a little bit. I'm going to turn on the EQ by clicking on the blue light here, and just boost the high shelf and take the low shelf down a little bit. Let's have a listen again. Okay, so now we have a riser. Now what I'm going to do, the last thing we're going to do within Massive, is I'm going to turn on this low pass 4. And here this basically says where we want to route the sound. We want it to go to filter 1. So F1 up here is F1, so filter 1. Now what this is going to do is when I play the note, it's not actually going to play until this kind of comes up, okay? So I'm going to route the same macro to turn this up over time as well. So again, I'm doing that by clicking and dragging on the number 1 and dragging it up. So now when I turn this up, it turns all of these with the 1 under it. So it turns this up when I crank this. It turns it up 48 semitones, so 4 octaves. It also turns the filter up to full. Let's have a listen. Okay, turns it up. All right, so now we want to do this automatically within our piece. So we don't want to have to sit there and turn Massive up as the piece plays. So what I'm going to demonstrate here is what we call automation. Now, I'll have a further tutorial on automation elsewhere on this site, but if we look in this lane, you'll see this red line in Massive, and it's kind of it's dotted because nothing's actually set in there. But if I click on certain aspects, like if I click on the amplitude here and start changing that, you'll see the line down here actually start moving around and kind of indicating where the button's set to. So if I click back on the macro, this is all the way down the bottom, and if I start turning it up, the line starts going up as well. But what we can do is actually click and drag in automation into the lane. And now what will happen is as this plays, this macro will go up automatically. Now, if I click something else, that line goes away. But if I click back on the macro, it's returned. Now, the reason why that's gone grey is because I've changed other settings, so I just moved something around. So it greys this out. To make that come back to be active, you just have to press this button up here because it just lets you try with different automation settings and things like that. So that's a really handy tip to actually know. So now if I play this, it's going to build up over time. So let's have a listen. Building in now. Cool, so let's have a listen to it with the rest of the piece. Now, our drop finishes a beat before the rest does. So what I'm going to do is just bring that back and make sure that's rising there. Let's have a listen. And then we have it. We have a pitch riser that rises over time. The other thing we could probably add down here is a hard clipper that might turn it up a little bit, sound a bit thicker. And there we have it. There is how you create a pitch riser. Now, in terms of structure and placement of these risers, it's completely up to you where you put them. What I might do is I might add one that moves across this 8 bars here. So I'm just going to create a new MIDI track using Control-Shift-M. I'm going to find the C1 octave, and I'm going to expand that over the full 8 bars. Okay, and I'm just going to use the automation to drag it up over 8 bars. So I'm going to add another node here just by clicking in and dragging this one back down. And then over here, I'm going to drag this automation up to automate the macro with inside massive to turn up over the 8 bars. Now, if you lose your automation, it can be found a lot of ways. So say if you click, say on this volume button here, and your automation runs away and you can't find it anymore, you can find a lot of ways. So if you go to this box here, it tells you where the automation is coming from. If you go massive and then find whatever you've automated, macro 1, anything you've automated will have a red dot next to it. Also down here, you'll see your macro down here. It will just say you're automating something within massive. Then also, if you just go back in here and say, I've clicked here by accident, so my automation's gone missing. But if I click back on the macro down here, you'll notice that it comes back into massive. It's just grayed out. So you just click that orange arrow key to turn the macro back on. All right, so now if we listen to this section, it's going to have another riser building up into this drop. Let's have a listen. And building into there. Now, we don't have to start these on C1. We could start them up higher, C2. It is pretty important that you keep them on the tonic note of your key, though, so it doesn't sound out of tune. So I'm just going to move these up an octave because I actually think I like it better starting on C2. Let's just have a listen to that again. So this just means the initial note starts higher and also finishes higher. I'm going to copy and paste this one down here. So I've just option click and drag, and that's actually taken the automation with it, which is really good. All right, so then in the last section, it builds up kind of to where the next section is going to be, and we'll talk about that later on when we get to the structure lesson. But here we'll just listen again. It builds up over this 8 bars and kind of leads into what we're going to call the breakdown. All right, so that's basically how you use a pitch uplifter or a pitch riser, as it's sometimes called, to kind of add tension to your piece. Electronic dance music is a lot about tension and release, and building those through these effects is really helpful in doing so.